Well, welcome everybody. This is part 4, the final chapter of What's the Deal with Samson. I'm so glad you could join us today. So grab yourself a cup of coffee, get in a comfortable chair, and let's see what lessons we can learn. Now we pick up as Delilah is trying to trick Samson into giving up the secret of his strength. I'm reading now from Judges 16:10. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me and lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." And he said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, well, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then, with men hidden in the room, she called out to him, "Samson, Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped those ropes on his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "All this time you've been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me, how can you be tied?" And he replied, "If you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric of the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with the pin. Again she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." While he awoke from his sleep, pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? Now this is the 3rd time you've made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Now recall, Samson has a hard time dealing with the tears of a woman as well. So he told her everything. "No razor has been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazirite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I'd become as weak as any other man." Now when Delilah saw that he had finally told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He's told me everything." Well, naturally, Delilah can't wait to snag that reward, so she spills the beans to the Philistine rulers. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. When she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you," well, he awoke from his sleep and thought, I'll just go out as before and shake myself free. But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. Nelly! Samson has repeatedly ignored God, opposed his will, and so now he faces the consequences of his actions, of his decisions. Then the Philistines seized him. They gouged out his eyes. They took him down to Gaza, binding him with bronze shackles, and they set him to grinding grain in the prison. But the hair on his head began to grow. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste to our land and multiplied the slain." While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring Samson out to entertain us." So they called Samson out of prison, and he performed for them. Now when they stood him among the pillars, Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." Now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof there were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Well, then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just one more time, and let me, with one great blow, get revenge on the Philistine for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back, and they buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. Now, right to the end, Samson acts out of personal revenge. He doesn't really consider asking for God's mercy nor guidance, but God knows Samson's fallen nature, and he uses it to bring about his sovereign plans. So what does all this mean for us here now, today? Well, several lessons stand out. Now, first and foremost, God can use anyone to fulfill his purposes. Then, too, self-indulgence, lust, violence, and revenge, they're the foundation of our own suffering and destruction. Next, as believers, it's essential for us to develop a spiritual maturity, which means continually growing in our understanding of God's truth and applying it to our lives while guarding our hearts against the temptations and distractions that can lead us away from God. Now, we got to understand God's nature. If we don't know God, truly know God, then we really can't serve him. Then we have to base our life on honoring God. Now, here's a simple litmus test to guide you. Simply ask yourself, what would Jesus do? That one question can guide you into making decisions that align your thoughts and your actions with the teachings and examples of Jesus, and can encourage you to seek God's guidance and wisdom in every decision you make. Now, the story of Samson reminds us of the importance of spiritual maturity, self-control, staying faithful to God's calling. Through Samson's story, we're encouraged to seek God's guidance, learn from our mistakes, and rely on his strength rather than our own. So let me ask you, what lessons do you personally take away from Samson's story? And how can you apply them in your walk with God? Boy, that's some good stuff right there, Maynard. Now, next week, we start a whole new series. I haven't decided on a topic. Now, if you've got one that you'd like to hash out, well, drop me a line. Okay. Now, if you like this, please push the like button down below. And even if you didn't like it, push it. If you did like it, you might consider sharing this with your friends or your family. If you didn't like it, well, you might consider annoying your friends and family and share it with them anyway. Until next week, I'll be here. You'll be here.